Mairin, send 20,000 now or Kaelie's blood is on your hands. My mother's shriek was a jagged midnight ambush, a desperate, delusional play to bleed me dry. I didn't flinch. I just whispered, "Call your golden child," and severed the connection. But when the police called the next morning instead of the hospital, I realized my family hadn't just targeted my bank account. They had targeted my very existence. That frantic echo was still vibrating in my marrow, a haunting contrast to the expensive, suffocating silence of the rooftop gala. The wind atop the West Loop high-rise didn't just blow. It cut, sharp and clinical, smelling of lake salt and expensive cologne. I stood at the edge of the rooftop gala, the Chicago skyline laid out before me like a circuit board of flickering amber and white. In my right hand, the Top Innovator Crystal Award felt surprisingly heavy, its sharp edges digging into my palm. To the hundreds of guests behind me, this glass slab was a symbol of my ascent in the cybersecurity world. To me, it felt like a target painted on my back. Success is a strange thing. We are taught to climb, to strive, to reach the peak. But nobody warns you about the thin air at the top. I've realized that true achievement isn't about the titles you collect. It's about how much of your soul you manage to keep once the vultures start circling. And as the crystal chilled my hand, I knew the vultures were already airborne. They were 800 miles away in Reno, but I could feel their hunger through the persistent, aggressive vibration of the phone buried in my clutch. I looked out at the Willis Tower, trying to anchor myself in the present, but the rhythmic buzzing pulled me back to the memories of Nevada, the hungry eyes of my family, the way my father looked at my report cards not with pride, but as if he were reading a stock ticker. Every A I earned, every promotion I secured, was never a milestone for me. It was just another deposit into a bank account they felt entitled to withdraw from. Have you ever reached the moment you worked your whole life for, only to wish you were invisible? It's a lonely kind of victory when your own blood sees your brilliance only as a way to brighten their shadows. I retreated toward a shadowed alcove near the rooftop garden, the muffled sounds of clinking champagne and corporate laughter fading into a dull hum. I finally pulled the phone out. The screen was a chaotic battlefield of notifications. Lyle had tried to call 4 times. My mother, Janelle, had sent a string of texts that bypassed any mention of my award or my life. Lyle needs $5,000 for a business deposit by tomorrow morning. The latest message read, "Don't be the selfish little girl you always were. Family carries each other, Mairin." The familiar weight of golden child debt pressed against my chest, making the crisp Chicago air feel thick and suffocating. Lyle, the brother who had invested away my college savings and my parents' retirement, was once again the priority. I opened my banking app, my fingers moving with a practiced, weary precision. I saw it immediately. A flagged pre-authorization attempt. Lyle had tried to bypass my secondary security layer to access my savings. He didn't even wait for me to say yes anymore. He simply assumed my hard work was his birthright. I leaned against the cold stone railing, closing my eyes. I thought about the words of a mentor who once told me that you cannot fix a house while the people inside are busy tearing down the walls. I am not turning my back on them because I've run out of love. I am doing it because I finally love myself enough to stop drowning just so they can stay dry. I looked at the innovative award one last time. If this trophy belonged to the family as they claimed, then they were welcome to the glass. I wanted the person who earned it back. The elevator chimed, a clean mechanical sound that signaled my exit. I walked toward the trash receptacle near the doors, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble. Without a pause, without a single tear, I dropped the prestigious Crystal Award into the bin. It landed with a dull thud among discarded silk napkins and half-eaten appetizers. It was just glass, after all. My value didn't live in that bin, and it certainly didn't live in a Reno casino. On my way out, I stopped by the restroom. An elderly janitor was meticulously polishing the brass fixtures, her face lined with the kind of honest exhaustion I respected. I reached into my bag, pulled out $500 in cash, the celebration money I had set aside for myself, and pressed it into her hand. "Hard work should stay with those who actually do it," I said softly, ignoring her stunned expression. I didn't need a trophy to know who I was. As I stepped into the elevator and the doors began to slide shut, the world outside blurred into a streak of gray and gold. Just as the seal tightened, my phone vibrated one last time. It wasn't Lyle. It wasn't my mother. It was a blocked caller ID, the screen glowing like a warning flare in the dim light of the lift. I didn't answer. I just watched the floor numbers count down, knowing that the silence was over and the midnight storm had officially made landfall. The elevator doors hissed shut, sealing me into a vertical coffin of brushed steel. I stared at the floor indicator as the numbers descended, but my mind was stuck on the glowing screen in my palm. Blocked caller. It wasn't a call. It was a summons to the front lines of a war I had tried to escape years ago. By the time I reached the lobby and stepped into the cool, biting air of West Loop, the city felt different. The skyscrapers weren't monuments of achievement anymore. They were just tall shadows where a person could hide or be found. I let myself into my apartment, the minimalist space greeting me with its clinical, silent perfection. I didn't turn on the lights. The ambient glow of Chicago filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the hardwood in shades of charcoal and ash. I moved to the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for a kettle. Peace, I realized, isn't the absence of noise. It's the ability to keep your head when everyone else is shouting. I've always been the one who kept my head while they lost theirs, and tonight was no exception. I set the kettle on the stove, the blue flame flickering in the dark. While waiting, I pulled my laptop from its bag. Habit is a powerful thing, and my habit was data. I checked my home network security logs and felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my neck. 19 failed login attempts from a residential IP in Reno, Nevada. Lyle was busy. Even while I was accepting an award, my brother was trying to pick my digital pockets. I looked at a framed photo on the counter, Kaelie and me as kids, sharing a single ice cream cone on a hot Vegas afternoon. I whispered to the glass, "Mairin would have given you the world if you hadn't tried to steal it from me first." Then, the silence of the room was shattered. My phone didn't just ring, it screamed. The blocked caller was back, and this time, I knew the tea wouldn't be enough to steady me. I swiped the icon and held the phone up. The screen flared to life, revealing my mother, Janelle, her face distorted by a camera held too close. Behind her, the lights were harsh and fluorescent, the audio a chaotic mess of distant sirens and rhythmic beeping. "Mairin! Oh God, Mairin!" she wailed, her chest heaving in a performance of hyperventilation. "It's Kaelie! There was an accident. Internal bleeding. We're at Barton Memorial." My father's voice, rough and jagged like broken glass, tore through the background. "They won't start the surgery, Mairin. They need $20,000 for the deposit because our insurance is tied up. Send it now, or your sister's blood is on your hands." I didn't blink. I stood in my dark kitchen, the blue flame of the stove reflecting in my eyes, and I looked at them. I looked at the blood on Janelle's sleeve. It was too bright, too viscous, more like stage makeup than real hemoglobin. I looked at the lack of a heart monitor behind them. Nevada law, NRS 439B 410, requires hospitals to stabilize any patient in a life-threatening emergency, regardless of their ability to pay. Barton Memorial wouldn't withhold surgery for a deposit. Not in this reality. "I am her sister, Dad," I said, my voice as flat as a desert highway. "I am not her life insurance policy. Being family means showing up with love, not just an invoice for a tragedy you've spent the evening rehearsing." The silence on the other end was instantaneous. The crying stopped. The sirens, which I now realized were likely a YouTube clip playing in the background, were cut off. Janelle's face shifted, the grief evaporating to reveal a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You selfish little bitch," she hissed, her voice dropping an octave. "You have hundreds of thousands in that Chicago account. You owe us. We raised you." Looking back now, I should have seen it coming, I murmured to myself, though I spoke loud enough for them to hear. But I finally understand that some people don't want a daughter. They want an ATM with a pulse. I looked directly into the camera lens, my gaze steady. "If it's truly an emergency, call your perfect golden child. Call Lyle. He's the millionaire crypto investor, isn't he? Let him save her. Let him use the money he tried to hack out of my account tonight." The screen went black as they cut the call. I stood in the darkness of my West Loop apartment, the kettle finally whistling, a shrill, piercing sound that felt like a victory cry. I turned off the flame. I had set a boundary, a wall of cold logic that they couldn't climb. But as I turned to head toward my bedroom, a sound stopped me. It was a faint, rhythmic tapping, not from the pipes, not from the wind. It was coming from my front door. In the hallway of my high-security building, someone was already waiting. I didn't know what was waiting for me next, but I realized then that the war hadn't just reached my phone. It had reached my doorstep. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I checked the peephole. 2 men in suits, not uniforms, but with the posture of people who carried badges. I didn't open the door. I retreated into the blue glow of my home office, the silence of the apartment now feeling heavy, almost industrial. I needed to move faster than the shadows at my doorstep. By 4:00 a.m., the Chicago skyline was a jagged silhouette against a bruised purple sky. I sat in the dark, my fingers flying across the keys with a precision that felt like a trance. In the world of cybersecurity, we say that data never forgets, and it never lies. People, however, are made of contradictions. I spent those pre-dawn hours bypassing the standard administrative hurdles, accessing HIPAA-compliant backdoors I'd helped build. I needed to see the Reno hospital admissions. I searched for Kaelie's name. Nothing. I searched for Hayes. Nothing. The bridge of truth I had tried to build for my family was missing too many bolts. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. If one piece of the structure is a lie, the whole thing is a death trap. I whispered to the flickering monitor. I'm not looking for a reason to hate them. I'm looking for a reason to stop hurting. But the more I dug, the more the soil felt like ash. Looking back now, I realize I was desperately hunting for a mistake, a typo, a delay, anything that would prove my parents weren't as cruel as the data suggested. I reached out to Professor Elias, the man who had been more of a father to me than the man currently trying to extort me. His voice over the secure line was gravelly with age and wisdom. "Mairin, listen to me," he said, his tone urgent. "I ran a check on your credentials as you asked. Your social security number was pinged 4 hours ago. It was used to access private medical insurance portals, but not for Kaelie's care. Someone was looking into your own coverage, kid. Integrity is doing the right thing, even when the only people watching are the ones waiting for you to fail." Elias had drilled that into me during my first year at the academy. Now, those words felt like a life jacket in a rising tide. I wasn't just being asked for money. I was being surveyed. I began a forensic harvest of my own digital life, cross-referencing the timestamp of the FaceTime call with the Wi-Fi signal Janelle's phone had emitted. It didn't take long. The signal hadn't come from Barton Memorial. It had originated from the guest Wi-Fi at the Silver Legacy Resort in Reno. The disappointment settled in my stomach like lead. They were in a casino suite, drinking champagne on my potential $20,000 while Kaelie live-streamed her dying breaths. I traced the breadcrumbs further and found a series of spoofed IP addresses. Lyle. My brother had been using a joint account I'd closed 3 years ago. An account that was supposedly purged but had been kept alive by a clerical error, and Lyle's talent for manipulation. He was using it to hide gambling debts that were spiraling into the 6 figures. I worked until the sun began to bleed through the blinds, my eyes burning. I prepared what we call a digital dead man's switch, an encrypted folder containing every log, every spoofed IP, and every recording of my mother's fake hysterics. If I were compromised, if my access were cut, this folder would go straight to my legal counsel and the Nevada Gaming Commission. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, Mairin. But boundaries are the walls that keep the gift from being stolen. I whispered that mantra until it felt true. At 8:30 a.m., the knock returned. It wasn't the rhythmic tapping of the night before. It was a heavy, authoritative boom that rattled the frames on my walls. I stood up, smoothed my hair, and walked to the door. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a witness. I opened the door to find 2 Chicago PD officers, their expressions grim. One of them held a phone with an active patch. Mairin Hayes, this is Officer Ramirez from Reno PD. I need you to listen carefully. Absolute betrayal has a specific sound. It's the sound of your own father's voice on a police recording. Ramirez informed me that I wasn't being contacted as an emergency contact. I was being named as the primary suspect in a felony investigation for elderly financial abuse and identity theft. My father, Ward, had provided the Reno authorities with a forged power of attorney document. It claimed I had used my position in Chicago to siphon off their retirement funds to pay for my luxury apartment, leaving them unable to pay for Kaelie's life-saving procedure. The legal snare was perfectly timed. They had used my own career as the weapon to destroy me. As the officers asked me to step into the hall, my laptop on the desk behind me gave a sharp, high-pitched ping. It was an automated alert from my personal security sweep. I glanced back, my heart stopping. A new life insurance policy had just been activated in my name. The death benefit was set to $1 million, and a claim form had already been drafted for an accidental fall, scheduled for the upcoming Monday. I realized then that they didn't just want my money. They wanted my ending. I looked at the officers, my voice steady despite the roar in my ears. Officers, I will go with you. But before we leave, you might want to look at what's on that screen. Because the people who reported me aren't just looking for an arrest. They're looking for a payout. I realized then that I hadn't been forgotten by my family. I had been appraised. And according to their math, I was worth a lot more dead than alive. I stood by the doorway of my Chicago apartment, the heavy, metallic scent of the lake mixing with the sterile tension of the 2 officers standing in my living room. They weren't just here to ask questions. They were the vanguard of a legal siege my own father had launched from a casino floor in Reno. According to the law, I was a suspect in an elder abuse case. According to my soul, I was the one being devoured. I looked at the lead officer, a man whose badge caught the morning light like a jagged blade, and I realized I had to be more than a victim. I had to be a fortress. "Please, come in," I said, my voice steady, carrying that clinical calm I had perfected in high-stakes server rooms. I didn't wait for them to dominate the space. I reached for my phone, activated a legal record app, and laid it on the coffee table. I am Mairin Hayes. I am a federally contracted cybersecurity analyst with an active security clearance. I am recording this interaction for my own protection and yours. I assume you have the warrant Ward Hayes filed in Nevada. The officers exchanged a glance. My professionalism was a shield they hadn't expected. I moved to my kitchen counter, pouring 2 glasses of water and offering them with a hand that didn't tremble. I didn't hold bitterness toward these men. They were just the messengers of a system my family was trying to weaponize. "I know you're doing your job," I added softly, But truth isn't a feeling. It's a footprint. And they forgot I know how to dig. We moved to my workspace, the heart of my defensive perimeter. The bright Chicago sun sliced through the blinds, casting prison-like bars across the hardwood floor. I sat at my laptop, the blue light illuminating my face as I began the forensic deep dive. With the officers watching over my shoulder, I initiated a full LexisNexis report. This wasn't just about a $20,000 lie anymore. This was about the moral floor dropping out from under my life. I watched the data scroll, a digital ghost of my identity being manipulated in real time. I uncovered a hidden LLC, Hayes Legacy Holdings, established 3 months ago in my name. The registered address was a P.O. box in Reno that I had never seen. I traced a series of pension transfers from my father, Ward, into this shell company. To any bank auditor, it looked like Mairin Hayes was laundering her parents' retirement funds to pay for her West Loop lifestyle. It was a synthetic identity theft of the most intimate kind. I leaned back, the reflection of the data flickering in my eyes. I thought about how some people spend their lives building homes, while others spend theirs building cages and calling it love. The most painful thing wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization of what they were willing to trade me for. To them, I wasn't the daughter who spent her 20s working 80-hour weeks to keep them afloat. I was just a commodity to be liquidated. I explained the concept of synthetic identity to the officers, showing them the time-stamped logs of when the LLC was formed, at a time when I was physically in a secure facility in Virginia, under federal surveillance. But the real horror was still buried. I dove deeper, bypassing the surface-level fraud and into the automated insurance triggers. The rooms seemed to grow quiet, the audio of the bustling Chicago street below dropping to a low hum as a single document populated on my screen. My breath hitched. I found it. A $1 million key person life insurance policy had been taken out on my life by the Lyle-managed shell company. It wasn't just a standard policy. It had a double indemnity clause. In the insurance world, that's the jackpot. It pays out double for accidental death. The activation timestamp matched the exact hour of the 2:00 a.m. call Janelle had made. Even worse, I found a draft in Lyle's synced cloud storage, a pre-written death benefit claim form, dated for this coming Monday. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The frantic call about Kaelie's internal bleeding, the demand for $20,000, it was all a distraction. It was meant to keep me panicked, sleep-deprived, and perhaps lure me into a frantic drive or a flight back to Reno where an accident could be neatly arranged. The math was chilling. I was worth more to the Hayes family as a corpse than as a daughter. In the corporate world, they call these Dead-Peasant policies. I never thought my own father would be the one to sign the premium. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming, I whispered, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. I didn't realize it then, but the moment I stopped saying yes to their demands, I became an asset they needed to collect on. I turned the screen toward the officers, my face a mask of stoic resilience. This isn't just financial abuse, officers. This is a murder-for-profit scheme. They've already picked out the date for my funeral. The air in the room shifted. The skepticism in the lead officer's eyes vanished, replaced by a dark, professional focus. He reached for his radio, but before he could speak, my work phone, the one with the encrypted line, erupted into a jagged ring. It was my boss at the security firm. I answered on speaker. "Mairin, where are you?" His voice was ragged, shaking with a fear I had never heard in him. "Don't look at social media. Stay away from your computer. Kaelie just went live on 3 platforms. She's showing the police report your dad filed and a video of her bleeding out. She's telling the world you're a thief and a killer who nyat her life support. The doxing has already started. They're posting your home address, Mairin. They're coming for you." The flashing blue lights from the squad cars outside reflected off the glass of my balcony door, a silent warning of the storm that had finally breached my walls. I looked at the murder plot on my screen, then at the officers, and then at the phone where my sister was effectively lynching me in the court of public opinion. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. They had taken my name, my reputation, and my safety. They had tried to take my life, but in their greed, they had forgotten one thing. A woman who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in the room. I haven't been forgotten, I murmured, standing up as the sound of a shouting crowd began to rise from the street below. I've been erased, and now I'm going to make sure the world sees exactly who held the eraser. I stood by the window, watching the flickering blue lights of the squad cars dance against the glass, realizing that the people below didn't see Mairin Hayes, the cybersecurity expert. They saw the monster Kaelie had created with a few filters and a handful of tears. My boss's voice wasn't just shaking with fear over the phone. It was the sound of my professional world collapsing under the weight of a sister's viral deceit. I haven't been forgotten. I've been erased, and in this new reality, the eraser was a TikTok algorithm. Saturday afternoon in Chicago usually feels vibrant, but today, the air in my office at the firm felt claustrophobic, thick with the scent of stale coffee and silent judgment. By the time I arrived to collect my personal belongings, the transition was already complete. I walked past the glass-walled conference rooms where I had saved this company from 3 major breaches in the last year, but nobody looked up. They stared at their screens, their faces illuminated by the blue light of Kaelie's viral execution. I saw the rapid cuts of her video on a dozen monitors, her face streaked with mascara, the secret location hotel room, and the captions screaming that I was a cold-blooded hacker who had frozen her life support funds. The fallout was instantaneous and surgical. My manager, a man I had considered a mentor, met me at the elevator with a security guard. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Mairin, the board has made a decision," he said, his voice flat. "Due to the nature of the allegations and the potential security risk to our clients, you are being placed on immediate administrative leave. We'll need your badge and your company laptop." I didn't argue, I didn't beg. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And in that moment, I realized my family wanted my career, but I only wanted my integrity. Even as the guard began to escort me toward the exit, I paused at my assistant's desk. The young woman was trembling, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. I reached into my bag and handed her a physical flash drive, a detailed handover file for the projects we were mid-cycle on. "Ensure the bridge inspection data gets to the city council by Monday," I told her softly. "Don't let my storm ruin your harvest." I wanted her to know that even when the world is burning your house down, you don't have to let the embers scorch your neighbors. I walked out of the building into a barrage of camera phones. Strangers were filming me, whispering, "That's her. That's the one who let her sister die." The feeling of public shame is a heavy, physical thing, like walking through chest-high water. I didn't realize it then, but Kaelie hadn't just attacked my bank account. She had stolen my presence in the world. By the time I made it back to my apartment, I had been doxing by 6 different justice accounts. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a bunker. As the sun began to dip behind the Chicago skyline, casting long, skeletal shadows across my living room, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a blocked caller. It was Lyle. His voice was smug, dripping with the depraved satisfaction of a man who believed he had finally broken his superior. "How's the view from the bottom, Mairin?" he sneered. "People are calling the house in Reno every 5 minutes. They hate you. You're the most hated woman in America right now." I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamps below. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I listened to the silence of my own breathing. "What do you want, Lyle?" I asked, my voice as cold as the Lake Michigan wind. "We have a settlement offer," he said. his tone shifting to that of a sleazy negotiator. Beau is willing to withdraw the identity theft report. Kaelie will post a follow-up saying it was all a misunderstanding due to medical stress, but it's going to cost you. You sign over the deed to that West Loop loft to the Hayes Legacy LLC. You sign a confession admitting to temporary insanity regarding the pension funds. We get the house, we get the closure, and you get to keep your freedom. The hidden threat was as clear as a razor blade. He implied that if I didn't sign, the evidence of my financial crimes, the forged documents Ward had planted, would be leaked to the FBI. He was giving me an ultimatum. Give us everything you've built, or spend the next decade in a federal cell. We made you, Mairin, he laughed. Everything you have belongs to the Hayes name. It's time to pay the tax. A name is just a label on a bottle, Lyle, I replied, my fingers already dancing across my second hidden laptop, initiating a cloud-synced recording. If the contents are poison, the label doesn't make it drinkable. You aren't asking for family support. You are committing extortion under U.S. federal law, 18 U.S.C. Cirter 875. Every word you say is a nail in your own coffin. I hung up, and for the first time in 48 hours, the panic didn't come. Instead, a transcendent calm washed over me. I realized that trying to explain the truth to people who profit from your silence is a waste of a good breath. I decided then to let the fire burn. If they wanted a show, I would give them one they would never forget. Family is supposed to be the anchor that keeps you safe in the storm, not the storm that tries to sink your anchor. Mine had been trying to sink me for 30 years. It was time to cut the rope. I moved with a quiet, deliberate power. I didn't pack a suitcase of clothes. I packed a Pelican case with my high-gain antennas, my forensic mirrors, and the hard drives containing every spoofed IP from the Silver Legacy Resort. I booked a one-way flight to Reno. I wasn't going back to beg for mercy or to sign their papers. I was going back to end the cycle. I was going back to show them that while they were playing with viral videos, I was playing with the foundations of their very existence. As I stood in the terminal at O'Hare, the late-night travelers blurred around me like ghosts. I took one last look at a photo on my phone. The Chicago skyline I had worked so hard to belong to. Then, I pulled up Janelle's contact. I didn't send a long explanation. I didn't send a plea. I sent 6 words that felt like a verdict. I'm coming home to give you exactly what you've earned. I turned the phone off and stepped into the tunnel toward the plane. Looking back now, I should have seen that this was the only way it could end. I didn't realize it then, but the moment I stepped onto that flight, I stopped being the girl who was being erased. I became the person who was going to rewrite the ending. The air in the cabin felt thin, but for the first time in my life, it was mine. The flight from Chicago to Reno was a blur of pressurized air and cold clarity. I didn't spend the time rehearsing a plea. I spent it verifying the digital backdoors I had spent the last 48 hours reinforcing. When the wheels touched down on the tarmac of Reno Tahoe International, the dry, high desert wind hit my face like a slap. I wasn't just arriving in a city. I was entering the lion's den. But for the first time in 30 years, I was the one holding the cage door. I didn't send a text to say I was coming home to save them. I sent it because even a ghost deserves a proper burial. By 9:00 p.m., the neon lights of the Silver Legacy Resort were a frantic, pulsing headache against the Nevada sky. I walked through the lobby, the sound of slot machines clattering like falling teeth, a symphony of desperate hope that I had once mistaken for my family's ambition. I took the elevator to the luxury VIP suite on the top floor. My heels didn't click on the thick, patterned carpet. They sounded like a countdown. True power is not being able to destroy others, but being able to remain unswayed by their destruction. I felt that power now, a cold, crystalline weight in my chest. I pushed open the double doors of the suite without knocking. The scene inside was exactly as I had calculated. There was no hospital bed, no smell of antiseptic, no hushed voices of grieving parents. Instead, the room was a gallery of greed. Lyle sat on a velvet sofa, a half-empty bottle of expensive bourbon on the table. Kaelie was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking perfectly fine in a silk robe, holding up a pair of rose gold diamond earrings that caught the light. Janelle and Ward were there too, surrounded by designer shopping bags from the hotel boutique. "Mairin, you're finally here!" Janelle cried out, instinctively reaching for a tissue to fake a sob, but the tears wouldn't come. She looked at the pelican case in my hand and her eyes sharpened. "Did you bring the papers? Lyle says the hospital is threatening to stop the treatment if the deposit isn't finalized." I didn't move. I stood in the center of their decadence, a black-clad ghost in their technicolor fantasy. I observed the physical evidence of their betrayal. The rose gold jewelry Kaelie was wearing. The very same jewelry I had traced back to a fraudulent charge on my secondary credit card. I looked at Ward, who wouldn't meet my eyes, and Janelle, who was still trying to play the part of the distraught mother. "I didn't come here for the money," I said, my voice cutting through the celebratory hum of the room. "I came here for the family I thought I had. Tell me the truth, right now, and we can walk away. Just once, be honest with me." Lyle laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. He stood up, towering over me with the unearned confidence of the golden child. "Honesty? We're past that, Mairin. You're here because you're trapped. You saw the TikToks. You saw the police report. You're a felon in the making unless you sign that apartment over to the LLC. We quashed the emergency story for a better one. The one where you're a thief." He stepped closer, his breath smelling of bourbon. "Kaelie's followers love a villain. And you, little sister, are the perfect one." Kaelie smirked, admiring her reflection in the darkened window. "The world thinks I'm dying because of you, Mairin. My engagement is up 500%. Why would I stop now? Lyle's right. That insurance policy he took out on you? It's our retirement plan. We made you, and now we're just collecting the dividends." The depravity of it was so complete that I felt a strange sense of relief. The bridge wasn't just broken. It was gone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, placing it face up on the marble coffee table. "You think a video changes anything, Lyle?" I asked, echoing his smugness from earlier. "It changes everything," he sneered. "Who are they going to believe? A crying girl in a hospital robe or a cold hacker from Chicago?" "You're right," I said, a slow, clinical smile spreading across my face. "It does change everything. But I wasn't recording you for a police report, Lyle. I didn't have to. You see, when I was at O'Hare, I took the liberty of recovering Kaelie's TikTok credentials. Since I'm the one who set up her security years ago, it wasn't hard. I tapped the screen once. We've been live for 10 minutes. All 2 million of Kaelie's followers just heard you admit that the emergency was a scam. They heard you admit to the insurance fraud LLC. They heard you admit to framing me." The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the faint, delayed echo of Lyle's own voice coming from Kaelie's phone on the charger across the room. The predators' faces didn't just fall. They evaporated. The quiet power I felt wasn't a desire for revenge. It was the satisfaction of watching the truth do what truth always does: burn away the masks. "You think this is a game? Mairin Hayes is not a name you get to use for your crimes," I said, standing tall as the comments on the live stream began to scroll past in a blur of rage and realization. "It doesn't change what you are, Lyle. It just changes who knows it. You didn't just confess to me. You confessed to the world and, more importantly, to the FBI agents who have been monitoring Kaelie's digital footprint since I flagged the LLC in Chicago." Janelle's face turned a sickly shade of gray. She looked at Lyle, then at the shopping bags, then back at me. "Mairin, baby, we didn't mean—" "Lyle said it was the only way to save the house. We are not punished for our sins, but by them," I replied, quoting a philosophy that felt like a verdict. Your greed was the architect of this prison, Mother. I offered you a way out 10 minutes ago, and you chose the lie. The legal reality of admissions against interest was settling in. Under Nevada law, they had just provided a voluntary confession of a felony conspiracy. Lyle lunged for the phone, his face a mask of terror, but the sound of heavy, rhythmic boots in the hallway stopped him. It wasn't the Reno police this time. The double doors of the suite didn't just open, they were breached. As I picked up my phone and turned toward the exit, ignoring Janelle's sudden, desperate cries for mercy, I realized that I wasn't walking out of a family reunion. I was walking out of a cage. I had spent 30 years trying to be the person they needed, but in the end, the only person I was ever responsible for was the woman standing in my shoes. But as I reached the door, the federal agents moved past me, their focus not on the insurance fraud, but on Lyle. One of them held up a warrant that made even the insurance scam look like child's play. Lyle hadn't just been stealing from me. He had been laundering money for a criminal organization out of Las Vegas, and he had used the Hayes Legacy LLC to do it. The golden child hadn't just built a cage, he had built a gallows. I stepped out into the hallway, the cool air of the corridor smelling like oxygen for the first time in my life. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The ghosts of Reno were finally behind me, and they were finally silent. The Reno terminal was bathed in a pale, sterile blue light as the first fingers of dawn reached over the Sierra Nevada mountains. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the baggage carts hum across the tarmac. Behind me, in the heart of the city, the House of Hayes had finally collapsed. The ghosts of Reno were silent now, but their absence left a heavy, ringing space in my ears. I realized then that I wasn't just leaving a city. I was leaving a 30-year sentence. For the first time in my life, the air didn't taste like dust and old debts. It tasted like oxygen. The fall had been swift, a domino effect of greed and arrogance that even Lyle couldn't stop. In the stark fluorescent reality of the precinct, the golden child had been reduced to a man in plastic flex cuffs, his face pale and eyes darting with a frantic, cornered energy. I watched from the other side of the plexiglass as federal agents read Lyle his Miranda rights. They had found the offshore connections, the laundry trail I had unearthed while tracing the life insurance premiums. The prince of the Hayes family was going to a place where his titles meant nothing, and his debts couldn't be ignored. Janelle and Ward were in separate holding rooms, their world having turned into a house of mirrors where every reflection was an accusation. The facade of the perfect family didn't just crack, it disintegrated. They began to turn on each other almost immediately, Janelle faking a heart spell while Ward shouted that Lyle had forced his hand. It was a somber, ugly sight. I stood there, holding a manila folder, what I called the restitution folder. It contained every bit of evidence showing Lyle's coercion over them. Even now, after everything, I chose a stoic mercy. I gave that folder to the lead investigator. I wasn't saving them from the consequences. I was just ensuring the consequences were accurate. Janelle saw me through the glass, her face a mask of tear-streaked ruin. She beat her palm against the window, her voice a muffled scream. "Mairin, how could you do this to your own blood? You've destroyed us!" I walked to the glass, looking into her eyes with a calm that felt like a quiet power. "I didn't do this to you, Mom," I replied, my voice a soft, steady vibration. "I just stopped lying for you. Truth isn't a betrayal. It's a mirror. If you don't like what you see, don't blame the person holding it." I didn't feel triumph. I felt a dizzying relief. Looking back now, I should have seen that their love was always a hostage situation. I didn't realize it then, but the moment I stopped paying the ransom, I became the only person who was actually free. By 7 a.m., I was walking toward Gate B12. The Reno airport at dawn is a place of transition, of people moving toward new lives or running away from old ones. I sat in a plastic chair, my laptop open one final time. My lawyer had sent the final affidavits. With a few secure digital signatures, I officially disassociated my credit, my identity, and my future from the Hayes estate. The legal severance was complete. I was no longer a resource for a shell company in Nevada. I was just Mairin Hayes, a woman who owned her own name again. While waiting for boarding, I saw an elderly woman struggling with a heavy carry-on and a tangled stroller. I stood up and moved toward her, lifting the bag into the overhead bin of the waiting area. "Let me help you with that, ma'am," I said. She smiled at me, a genuine, warm expression that had nothing to do with what I could do for her. It was a small moment, but it mattered. It was a nod to the fact that my heart wasn't hardened, just better protected. You cannot save people from a storm they are intentionally brewing, but you can certainly help someone who is just trying to find their way through the rain. I boarded the flight to Chicago, the hum of the engines a soothing white noise that drowned out the echoes of Lyle's mocking laughter. I leaned my head against the cool plastic of the window as we ascended over the desert. Below me, the lights of Reno faded into the vast, indifferent brown of the Nevada basin. I whispered to the little girl I used to be, the one who worked 3 jobs and never bought herself a new coat so Lyle could have a sports car. "You're done now. You can rest. No more carrying people who refuse to walk." The transition from the smoke of the past to the oxygen of the future was a slow, beautiful burn. Months later, in Chicago, the season had shifted to a golden, crisp autumn. I stood on the balcony of my new loft in the Reno Arts District, the warm, golden hour light painting the brickwork in shades of honey. I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by friends, real friends, the kind who didn't know my bank balance and didn't care. We were talking about a hiking trip to the Ozarks, a simple joy of a life untouched by the parasitic hum of family dread. I received a final letter that morning, postmarked from the Nevada Department of Corrections. I didn't open it. I knew what it said. Lyle was serving 5 to 10. My parents had lost the house on Coral Shale Street to foreclosure, their credit a scorched earth ruin. I looked at the envelope, feeling a brief, passing sting of sadness for the family they could have been. Then, I dropped it into the recycling bin among the junk mail. Family is a choice we make every day, not a sentence we are born into. And I had chosen a different family now, one built on respect instead of ransom. The new reality was breathtaking. I had been promoted to Senior Director of Security at a top-tier firm. My reputation wasn't just restored, it was enhanced. People respected the woman who had the backbone to stand up to a viral lynch mob and win with nothing but the truth. I realized then that cutting them off wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. I was finally carrying the only person I was ever responsible for, myself. I turned back to my friends, the sound of laughter filling the air as the sun set over Lake Michigan. The ghosts of Reno had finally stopped screaming. For the first time in 30 years, the air tasted like victory. I looked at the city below, the lights flickering on like a promise. If you've ever rebuilt your life from the ashes of a betrayal, you know that the most beautiful thing you can own is your own peace. And that peace is a trophy I'll never throw away. If you've ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to save your own soul, I want to hear from you. Tell me your story in the comments below. I'm reading every one.